Hi, welcome to Adventures with Reid and Tiff. My name is Reid, and today I'm going to talk about what we packed for completing the O circuit at Torres Del Paine National Park in Chile. Uh, my pack that I'm going to go through had a base weight of 12 pounds before water, food, etc., which is a little heavier than I wanted, but there were a few things that were necessary for this trip that added on some weight. But overall, I just hope that this helps some people to decide what they need to pack for the trip. The trip itself was amazing. It was 130 kilometers or so of hiking through some fantastic landscapes, geographies. The nature was great. We didn't see too much in terms of wildlife, but the glaciers, the stunning mountain vistas, everything was fantastic. I'm going to go through what we packed in a few different categories. The first is what I wore on the trail. Myself and Tiff were a little bit different on things, and I'll talk about our differences. The first thing is what we wore on our feet. I wore a pair of non-waterproof trail runners, whereas Tiff wore some waterproof hiking boots. That's just a difference in preference between the two of us. I like the lightweight, airy version of the trail runners, whereas Tiff wants to have something with a little more support and that stays dry. The thing that I wasn't expecting is how much dust there was, and I was finding that I was getting some more hot spots than usual and having to tape up my feet to make sure that I didn't get blisters in areas. On my head, I wore this hat for almost all the time. On the really windy days, I packed this hat in my backpack because it would have got blown off. If you have a hat that has some sort of a cord on it, then you could wear that probably all the time. If you have any type of injuries or injuries that act up sometimes when you're hiking, this is not the time to assume that they won't. It is technical, terrain, hard terrain. I wore just this simple knee brace the whole time, but it's one of the ones that has the things on the side to prevent side-to-side movement because I hurt my knee on a previous hike, and it's not usually an issue, but it would have been an issue without this. I wore that the whole time. Some underwear that is easy to dry and that doesn't allow for chafing. I'm just going to do a blanket statement. Everything that I wore is some sort of dry fit because it needs to be able to get wet and dry out. Whatever your favorite pair of hiking socks are, that should be what you choose. You don't want to go with something that you haven't tested or with something that you don't really like. And then a good pair of hiking pants, something that's durable, something that's maybe a little bit water resistant and definitely wind resistant because it is very windy. And then if it's something that requires a belt that's going to be comfortable with the hip belt of your pack. If your pack has a hip belt, this belt by Arcade is really low profile, so it doesn't bother me with when my pack hip belt is on. And then for your top, this is a personal preference, but I think that this was the right choice to make, a sun hoodie, because it will protect the back of your neck. Then you're really only putting sunscreen on your face and maybe your hands. I wore this the entire time, and I don't normally like having the hood up, but because of how strong the sun was, especially coming from Toronto where it's winter and we're not getting much sun right now, I had the hood up the entire time. So that is what I hiked in. In terms of what we packed everything in this 33-liter pack. Tiff has the exact same one I do. But the important part is that this has so much more space in it. When we packed it, it's down fairly low because you're going to need to put in your lunches, your snacks, your food, etc. So you need to allow for there to be space for that. I'll pause here for a second to talk about how we did this trip. We chose for the option where we had the setup tents for 4 nights and Refugio for 3 nights. You can do, I think, Refugios for 5 nights, setup tents for 2 nights, or setup tents the whole time, or of course, bring your own. If you're bringing your own, you obviously need a bigger pack because you need to have your sleeping bags, your tent in there as well. So that's why we can go with a fairly small pack. As well as if you're planning to bring all your food, make sure to pack all of that to see how much space that adds up, because if you're doing 8 days of the O circuit like we did, that's a lot of food if you're bringing your own. We opted for the food plan where they gave us breakfast, a packed lunch that we then had to put into our bag, and then dinner as well. So that is part of why we were able to go with a small pack. If you're extremely ultralight, you might be able to do everything we did with less, including your tent. There was someone there whose base weight, including their tent and everything, was 12 pounds. This is 12 pounds, so they basically did everything that we did, but just for less. And I'll talk about where you can maybe save some weight. But we'll start with going on the outside of the pack. And so I had a 500 milliliter Nalgene bottle. I like this because I can put hot water in it. So we actually had coffee in it for a couple of times. But also most of the electrolytes that I was bringing get mixed in 500 milliliters of water. So it helped for that. And then the last thing is it can get under taps in a sink fairly easily, because you're a lot of the time filling up in the bathroom sinks. So that was good. My other water bottle, I only think you need a 1 liter of capacity. I don't think you need 1.5 liters of capacity like this. So we didn't always run with them completely full. But my other water bottle is this simple, light, collapsible bottle. I like this for traveling, mostly for on the airplane. I can just shove it in and it's not really taking up much space. But also I like it because it's fairly lightweight too. In the hip belt pockets, this was dedicated to snacks for the most part. And then I also have this bag which mostly had sweets in it. Like I like to hike with Sour Patch Kids, although when I ran out, they didn't really sell anything like that. So Skittles became my new thing that was in there. In this Ziploc bag here, if you're checking a bag on the way, then you can bring something that has a small blade like this Swiss Army knife card. I like it because I like the scissors on it, and tweezers, etc. I don't think you necessarily need it if you are not planning on checking a bag, because if you were to ask at the campground or the refugio, I'm sure that they would have tweezers or scissors or whatever. In this bag also is the first aid kit. Now, Tiff and I share a first aid kit, so me having it means she didn't have anything. Just has things like Band-Aids in it. I had a decent amount of Leukotape with me for blisters, which we used almost all of it, which is why I don't have it with me right now. So it was definitely good to have. I also have this little repair kit, which has some Gorilla Tape, some thread, some needles, which is helpful. And then just I do a couple squares of tenacious tape. That's so that if I get a hole in like a puffy jacket or something, I can just put that up. Also just a single-use polysporin, which I've taped because it was used so that I could use it more. So that's on the outside. Also on the front, now I would switch this stuff inside of the bag if I had some wet clothing that I needed to dry on in the mesh part. But for the most part, I had my rain jacket. This is the Montbell Versalite. It's a very lightweight, very packable rain jacket. I recommend trying to save weight, especially in that area, because you're going to be carrying it a lot. And there's a big difference between some of the hard shells in terms of weight and packability. And then a simple pair of rain pants that also is relatively light, because it is windy and you're probably going to want that both for the wind and for the rain. This is a comfort item, but because we're mostly sitting on the side of the trail for our breaks and for lunch, and sometimes it's wet, just a simple sit pad that fits nicely in the front of the bag was something that we decided to bring. So this at the top, obviously the way you organize it will depend on what your pack has in terms of organization. But I have my sunglasses in a case. These are good polarized glasses because the sun is no joke in Chile. The case is important because on the overcast days, I want to still be able to have it in my pack without crushing the glasses. Some toilet paper. You don't need a lot. You don't need like a full roll. I think that both Tiff and I had about a third of a roll with us. And that's because although almost every bathroom will have toilet paper, you will run into cases where like it's run out, or some of the outhouses that are at like guard stations and stuff like that won't have toilet paper. So having a little bit just in case, as well as just in case for emergencies on the side of the trail, is useful. If you expect to pee on the side of the trail a lot, then something like a cool cloth is going to be useful. Inside of this bag, there's a second Ziploc bag. If at any point we use toilet paper on the side of the trail, it would go into this bag and then get thrown out at the next opportunity. You do need to pack out your toilet paper. You're not supposed to bury it. So that's something that's important, and why something like a cooler cloth might be worthwhile. Also in the top, I just kept all of my liquids. Again, these were shared with Tiff, so a lot of these things, if you're going with a partner or even with a group, you might want to talk about what liquids you're bringing so that you don't need to double up on things. So the things that that Tiff and I didn't double up on were these, and then the things that we doubled up on were these. So we both had a hand sanitizer. As you can see, I didn't use too much of it, so we probably could have done with just one, but you never know. Because everywhere had water available and soap, it meant we didn't use it that much, whereas I expected, you know, if for an 8-day backcountry trip, I'd probably use a lot more of this. I decided to bring a little wilderness wash from Sea to Summit instead of powdered soap, just because we were able to shower most days. And the powder soap is great from a lightweight perspective, but I just don't find it that easy to use when you're actually using a large quantity of it. So I opted for the extra weight of liquid soap. And sunscreen. This is extremely important. Get the highest SPF you can get. The sun is really strong. They have a large hole in the ozone layer in that area, so you get UVA and UVB radiation. This stuff I really didn't like because it was thick and, you know, just kind of annoying to have on my face, but it worked really well. So this was SPF 60. It worked better than some of the other people in our group's sunscreen. And that's good because I didn't want to get badly burned. Reapplying it throughout the day is also important. So because I was wearing this sun hoodie the whole time, I didn't need to put on too much sunscreen. So I have quite a bit left, but the other sunscreen that Tiff had is almost empty. Now things that we shared, some hand cream, didn't really use it much, probably could have left it at home or found someone else that had a little bit of hand cream if it got too bad. Voltaren for sore muscles, that came in handy a lot. Chafing cream, this was used, so that's good. I always like to know what got used on the trip to make sure that I didn't overpack for the next one. Lip balm with sunscreen in it. Again, sun is no joke. And then these are some eye drops that I use because my eyes get really dry on airplanes, as well as with the dust, sun, wind, they got dry. So these work really well. And those are the ones that I use. Now inside the pack, here is sort of the first really optional item, but item that everyone had, and that was some sort of a camp shoe or sandal. I think everyone had them. I didn't really see many people going around with just still their hiking boots on. And there were too many things like screws, pieces of glass, stuff like that, that I would not recommend going bare feet. You're going to hurt yourself. And then the campsites themselves, they're not flat. They're not easy to walk around, and they're a little bit gravelly. So having something with a tread is useful. This is a spot to save weight though. These ones weigh a little bit more than I'd like, but because it was winter here in Toronto and I didn't really look soon enough, all the things that I was looking for that were lighter weight, I couldn't find in my size. So I ended up bringing these. They worked great. They just were a little heavier than I would like. Now inside the bag, this bag, like most, are not waterproof. It's water resistant. So anything in the bag needs to be protected. I wouldn't recommend using a rain cover because it's just going to blow away. So I used a pack liner. Tiff's had a Nylaflume pack liner, which is a little bit lighter, and then mine had a contractor garbage bag because the other Nylaflume ones that I ordered didn't come quick enough. For organization, I use this Sil nylon bag that had all of our snacks, electrolytes, things like that we brought from Canada that was in here. We were very careful to not bring too much because we were going to have to carry it all. Next is the puffy jacket. So this is necessary, I think, because it does get cold in the evenings and in the morning. So even if you don't need it during the day, we definitely all used our puffy jackets during the trip, and just, compress it down into your bag to get it out of the way. In the pockets of the puffy jackets, I have a very lightweight set of gloves because we went from December 31st and we finished up on January 7th. So we were in sort of the warmer time period. If you're going sometime that's colder, thicker gloves would be necessary. Same thing, I have a very thin toque here that's good at getting rid of moisture. But if it was colder, I would wear something heavier. A buff, always good to have. And then these I didn't end up using, but would have been useful if it was wetter for us. We had amazing weather, which I mean, I'm not going to complain about that, but I didn't need these. These are waterproof, windproof over gloves, so I could put them over these and make these a lot warmer and keep them dry as well. Now, inside of the bag, I like to store everything in ways that are easy to grab and figure out where things are. I brought the Sawyer Squeeze water filter because the agency we booked with, they recommended filtering water, but I think that's just to protect themselves. Realistically, we didn't use this. We just used water from flowing creeks and we didn't filter anything. Most of the people on the trail didn't. I did see some people that were filtering. So it's a personal choice. If you want to and you're worried, definitely bring a filter. It's worth the wait if you're worried about the conditions. In the other bags, this is sort of my ditty bag with all the random extra items. So obviously we were using things like cell phones, cameras, stuff like that. So having a little power bank, the lightest you possibly can have, is useful because it's hard to get to some of the plugs because everybody's trying to charge. So on certain days, we just didn't bother trying to get to the plugs. And then on other days where we saw one available, we got our travel adapter in and charged this up too. This adapter I bought there because I brought a big universal one with me and then found this, which was much lighter, much simpler. So I bought that to save some weight, which was good. Have the typical cables. These are the iPhone cables. Also have a small USB cable. This cable was a little bit too small because, again, you're vying for space on the plugs and there's not always somewhere good to just put something down right beside it. Sometimes it's on the floor, sometimes it's on a windowsill. So having a little bit longer cables was actually useful. But for charging this, a lot of the times I just had it sitting on top of it, which, is not the best, but at least it worked. You will need a headlamp, and even if you're not planning on doing things like getting to the base of the towers for sunrise, the Refugios turn off their power for the most part around 11 or 12, depending on the Refugio, because a lot of them are on generator power. So even if you need to get up in the middle of the night to go pee, having a headlamp is useful. But because you're not going to use it a ton, something that's lightweight, like this is the Nitecore NU25, which is an ultralight one, or Tiff's is the NU20 Classic, which is even lighter than this one. I didn't use this, but a small tensor bandage, elastic bandage, whatever you want to call it, can be helpful if you get hurt and it's something that you don't have a brace for example. So it was something that was sort of a peace of mind thing, because I have got hurt not bring this, and then it's a little bit more annoying to use other things to make do of something that you could have just brought. I have one sheet of paper and a mechanical pencil, just if I needed to write any notes. I have a cork ball. This is because I have some inflammation in my hip sometimes when I either sit for long flights or from hiking, so this was great for rolling it out. I think everyone on the group used it for some sort of sore muscle group at some point or another. So the cork balls are a lot lighter than the rubber balls, so that's why I have a cork one. Just a short thing of cord is not necessary, but it can come in handy. This we used as a makeshift clothesline in the refugios, just going from like bunk bed to bunk bed when we did some laundry. In the tents, especially if they're the raised tents, there's usually some straps and things underneath that you can hang stuff off of, so that's good. These packing cubes are from Osprey. They're ultralight packing cubes. They're not compression cubes. They're really light. I just like them for keeping all the stuff organized. And then a small combination lock. This is just your typical luggage lock. It was recommended by the company that we booked with. I used it once. I don't think I necessarily needed to use it. There is the possibility that someone could steal something. I wasn't really concerned about it. Only time I used it was when there was actually lockers in the room, which just suggested to me like they might have had a problem with that there. One thing that I would have brought after doing this is a couple of small clothespins. One of our friends brought them, and it was good for clipping the towels and stuff like that to the straps under the tent so that they didn't blow away. But I mean, only a couple things blew away and just went and grabbed it, put it back kind of thing. So it's not the end of the world, but they also didn't weigh much to bring. In this small cube, this is my toiletry bag. So the lightest toothbrush that I could find that was still a full toothbrush. I have the ones where you just like pinch it or like cut in half and everything like that. But this is only 8 grams. And for me, it's worth it to have a full toothbrush. We use toothpaste tabs for this. So I just brought enough for Tiff and I to use. A few of them will probably break during the trip. So, you know, maybe bring a couple extras, but not too many extras. You don't want the extra weight. There won't be options for getting things like painkillers and stuff like that. So I would just bring a couple of everything you think you might need. So there's some Advil nighttime in here. There's some Tylenol cold nighttime in here. Benadryl for allergic reactions, which one of the people in our group did have, which they took one of them. As well as just a combination of aspirin, some daytime Advil, some Gravol, like just a couple of the things that you might need. So it doesn't weigh too much, but you're not bringing all those bottles with you. Something that was really important for me, I got, I think, some food poisoning during the hike, which meant that I was spending a lot of time on the toilet, but there's no toilets between one refugio or campsite and the next. So Imodium, I guess I used 5 out of the 10 that I brought. Imodium is very useful to have just in case you have any issues, because there's not many options, and it's also not something you really want to be dealing with on the side of the trail, because there's not a lot of privacy there, and it's just not fun. In terms of throat lozenges, for us, it's January, December, so I think we all picked up something either on the plane or from each other. So we used a bunch of these throat lozenges too. some ginger chews for upset stomachs. I don't bring Q-tips with me. I bring an ear picker instead. It just less waste, less weight. Dental floss, both for its actual use, but also it can be used for a bunch of other things if you needed it for it. Because it was 8 days, but we had multiple travel days ahead of it, some clippers for toenails, for fingernails came in handy. I think we all used them. Again, like if you're going with a group, maybe talk about who's bringing what so that you don't bring extra stuff. I was sort of the one that brought like all of the stuff, and then people borrowed some things from me because I was also the one that planned the trip. So I figured I should be the one that brings that stuff too. Aqua tabs, just water treatment tabs. This was, for emergencies if needed. They don't weigh much. They just give some peace of mind. Probably, instead of bringing the filter, I should have just brought a few more of these to be on the safe side. And then I brought a couple of extra foam earplugs just in case anyone forgot them and needed them, as well as I had just some small earplugs that I use at night. In the refugios, the snoring is crazy. There's just so much of it, both from the people you're with as well as most of them don't really have much noise separation, so you're hearing everyone along your hallway. And then for the campsites, between the wind, the rain, things like that, running water nearby if you're near a stream, having earplugs can be helpful, especially if you're a light sleeper, but even if you're a heavy sleeper, because they're noises you might not normally have. Okay, I forgot a couple very important items. Underneath of the hood of my pack, in an area that I could easily get, I also had a waterproof bag. This is Dyneema, so very light, but that was where I could keep our passports, also my wallet, and then I just had printed out the slip which had the travel insurance information on it so that it was easy to get. Every campsite, every refugio, you needed to give them your passport. Also a little slip of paper called the PDI slip, which was printed on receipt paper basically. So very fragile, very easy to lose, but you needed it everywhere, otherwise you were going to get taxed. So having something where you can keep all your stuff safe and sound and easy to access was helpful. Also underneath, I have my house key, just the single key. I don't need to be carrying things like my car keys with me. I had a couple of these large Ziploc bags. One of them was used to repack our lunch every day, just to have it somewhere that would, there's no risk of any sort of leaks, although most of the stuff was pretty dry for the lunch. But also then the garbage would go in it as well. And we also got all of our travel documents, which was a fairly large folder, and those documents needed to come with us and be safe, so my other Ziploc bag had that in it. And then just in case you do need to use the washroom on the side of the trail in the case of emergency, a lightweight trowel can come in handy. This one only weighs 17 grams. And then the last thing, in terms of what I was carrying, is my clothing. So this is the clothing that I wasn't wearing during the hike. The way I tend to pack is not only do I try and pack as lightly as possible, but if my clothing doesn't fit into this large packing cube, which is not a compression cube, then for me, that's probably bringing too much stuff. Everybody's different on that. I would have actually liked to have less stuff, but because of the temperature changes, there's some things in here that take up more space than I would have liked. So in addition to the underwear that I was wearing, I had 2 pairs of underwear. That was so that I could, be cleaning them along the way, drying them, and have a dry pair to wear in the mornings. I could have done with just 1 extra. I think that would be a spot where I would have saved some weight. For socks, I have 1 extra pair of hiking socks. And then because everyone was really talking about how make sure to bring waterproof boots and seem to be making a big deal of it, even though I'm used to hiking without waterproof shoes and just dealing with wet feet and making sure to dry them out properly. They got in my head a little bit, so this is probably a packing of my fears. I brought some waterproof socks and then just some really thin liner socks to go inside, because waterproof socks, at least these ones, are not comfortable it by themselves. Having some sort of liner inside is useful. I liked using them because it kept my feet dry, but it wasn't necessary. I could have done without them. And also, you still need to air out your feet during the day, because although they keep water from going in, they also keep moisture from going out. So like these little socks inside would get really sweaty. So I was still taking these off and airing out my feet. So if I'm doing that anyways, maybe just stick with the other socks. Or, if you like keeping your feet dry the whole time, wear some waterproof boots. We were able to shower almost everywhere. Los Perros had no hot water, and glacier water is not something that I wanted to shower in, and I don't think anyone in the whole camp did. But otherwise, every other night we showered, so having a lightweight, foldable towel is useful, and something that's going to dry quick too. I have one dry fit t-shirt for camp. That was also, as sort of a just in case if I decided I didn't want or didn't need to be wearing my sun hoodie, I could have switched to the t-shirt for hiking. A pair of camp pants. These are some really lightweight joggers, but these were mostly just for around camp, as well as I slept in them. So, it was something that I wanted to make sure everything had sort of double duties. I brought base layer pants. I use these for our early morning hike to the base of the towers, as well as for a really windy James Gardner Pass day. These were helpful as well. And in that case, I didn't have to wear the rain pants that I tend to get sweaty in, so I liked that as the option. And then the last thing, it's another one of the packing cubes. The last thing was just a light grid fleece. So I basically took all the fleeces I own, weighed them, chose the lightest one. I have a version of this with a hood, but between having the hood on my sun hoodie, hood on my puffy jacket, also toque, I just thought it wasn't necessary, so I went with a little bit of weight savings, and so I chose my lightest thing. And that's going to be how you can save the most weight for your trip, is weigh everything you own, use the lightest thing, or if you weigh everything you own and something seems really heavy, look to see what lighter versions are online. I could definitely shave probably 2 or 3 pounds off of this by buying more expensive, more ultralight gear, but I really like the gear that I have and I've used it a lot. So because of that, I keep on using it. But if I didn't have gear and I was just going and buying it for the first time, then definitely there's some spots to save. The only other things to talk about for the trail is 2 things that I brought that I wouldn't bring again. And that is my GoPro, as well as it's on this stick for, it works as a tripod, it works as a selfie stick, etc. I love my GoPro, I love using it, but I don't love the weight of it. So I would have preferred to save the weight off of that. And then I decided last minute to buy some small binoculars. They were nice to have, but most of the wildlife we saw was either right up close to us, or it was out of the window of a bus or something like that, where wasn't getting these out quick enough in order to use them. So I wouldn't bring them. However, if one of your hobbies and one of the reasons for doing this is that you love birding or something like that, definitely, you bring a pair of binoculars. But if you're just trying to see nature better, then I don't think this was necessary. And in fact, you could probably use the zoom on most phones to sort of do the same thing to see what you need to see. So these together were over £1, so I wouldn't have brought these again, but it all depends on what you're doing. I was shooting content with this, so I could have done it on my phone, but it depends on what you decide on. For trekking poles, we brought our trekking poles. If you're only doing a carry-on for your luggage, Obviously, you can't bring trekking poles. TSA does not allow it, but I'll talk about how we brought these. There's also a lot of places where you can rent gear as long as you have enough time before and after to go pick it up and drop it off. Since we brought our own trekking poles, I also put some stickers on them to differentiate them in case other people had the same poles. These little stickers Tiff designed, so nobody can say, oh, these are our poles. Definitely they're unique in that way. So how did we bring trekking poles? We went with a group of 6 people. So for that, for all 6 of us, we had one checked bag, and it was included in our tickets anyways, but obviously we didn't want to bring 6 checked bags. That seems ridiculous. But we stayed at the same place in Porto Natales at the beginning and at the end. And because of that, they actually held our checked bag from the beginning of the hike to the end, which was great. And most places will offer that service if you talk to them. Otherwise, you can also generally do it through like the travel agencies and stuff like that you've used to book your trip. In terms of the other benefit of having the checked bag, or you could do it just the way this is packed right now, the travel time was very long, and we all wanted different clothing for the plane than we did for the actual hike. Also just because we stank at the end. So having something that smelled better to put on was useful. So this little backpack, I got ahead of time thinking that I would use it for going up to the base of the towers or for going to Mirador Britannico and Francis. But after wearing it a bit ahead of time, I decided that it just wasn't comfortable. So what we did instead is we packed everything for those trips into my bag, and then we packed everything that we didn't need for those out and back trips into Tiff's bag and left Tiff's bag. So still a much lighter bag to take, and that worked out better because the hip belt helped make it more comfortable. But instead, because I already had this bag, I used it as sort of what all my travel stuff went into, and then I put it in this, but it separated everyone's stuff so that it wasn't just a jumble of clothing. In terms of what we brought on the plane, that is up to everyone, but I have a neck pillow, a small one, wireless earbuds because I listen to stuff on the plane like podcasts. This eye mask was actually something that I bought on the way back because the little hat that I use is what I normally use for an eye mask. But what was unexpected and that I didn't plan for is that going from Porto Natales back, almost everyone was asked to check their bags. Even though this is clearly a carry-on size or smaller, they made people check their bag because everyone was bringing fairly large amounts of carry-on. So it made sense. It was just unexpected. And if I knew better, I would have packed everything into this that I needed so that I could just slip this under the seat. So I hope that you like this. I hope that this was helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section. We are trying to grow this channel, so please subscribe and like this, and we will be putting out more videos based on our trip. So stay tuned to those. Thank you.